All right, we're live. So three, two, one. Harrison and I were sitting in our office, eating our. Oh wait, I did that wrong. Hang on. Three, two, one. Harrison and I were sitting in our office, our hands knee-deep in a vase full of gummy bears, next to half-drunk Scotch glasses of chocolate milk. And that's when she walked in, tall, beautiful, legs all the way up to the controller. She looked concerned, frightened. "My name is Miss Video Games," she said. "You need to help me find my sister 3D platformers." Harrison and I looked at each other. We nodded. "We're on it, Video Dame. We'll find out what happened to your sister, even if we search the whole goddamn dirty video game industry." Alright, Harry, you can come back now.
That was the single lamest thing I've ever heard.
It's gonna be awesome. Put it to some noir music. It'll be the best.
Yeah,
Alright.
no, I'm gonna put it in because now we have to reference it, I think.
Yep. Alright, so do you want to introduce the show then?
What did you pre-plan that?
I thought about it for like a week, and then I just remembered it in the 5 seconds where you went to get a drink.
I was just thinking, like, that looked like you had a script and you just didn't tell me until the last minute.
I did. I wrote it out in that like 5 minutes.
Props to you, Spanos. Okay, since I'm introducing the show. You ready?
Yep.
Okay. 3, 2, 1. And welcome back to another episode of the PYP podcast. Today we have just me and Ben. That is
Hey,
Harry
how's it
and
going?
Ben. Good. Now, do you want to introduce our topic for today, Ben?
Sure. So this week we have a pretty interesting topic we felt, where Harry and I are going to explore the 3D platformer genre. What happened to it, and a whole bunch of games and the different gameplay revolving around 3D platformers. Now, 3D platformers were most popular in the Nintendo 64 and GameCube era. And if you ever played games in that generation, you know all about them. We had games like Mario 64, Donkey Kong 64, a lot of things with 64 at the end of it. But we also had Banjo-Kazooie, other games made by Rare, Ape Escape, Spyro, Crash Bandicoot on the PlayStation.
All will be covered.
All will be covered. We're going to talk about all facets of it. But to start off with, I was wondering, Harry, what was the first 3D platformer you played?
Now that's an interesting question. When I got my 64, I got two games with it: a 2D platformer and a 3D platformer. So,
a little bit of the old world and the new world.
My first two games were Yoshi's Story and Banjo-Kazooie. So, Banjo-Kazooie is my first 3D platformer. In fact, that's why that game is. I attribute to why I still like games because of that particular game. Like that's the start of my journey.
So if you didn't have Banjo-Kazooie, you don't think video games would have stuck?
No, I don't say that, but that's why it stuck so quickly.
True. Now, can you remember back to when you were a child, what attracted you to Banjo-Kazooie? Like, can you go back into your time's mind and think of what your first experience moving around in that 3D world was like?
Extremely difficult, because you would move, as a kid, you would move the controller with the Z-axis, just because you haven't quite worked out how to work the controller properly yet.
Yep.
Especially
and the Nintendo 64 controller was a hard one to work out.
Yeah, and especially through swimming when inverted.
Yeah.
I just remember, signaling the controller to go up to swim up, and it would work now with a Wiimote, but it just didn't then. That's actually kind of funny to think about, that imagery, because a lot of kids did it, and a lot of parents did it too, with the move controller. It's a very common sight now, because they're Wiimote, so it doesn't look as silly.
At the time, unless you had played a lot of flight simulators, like Axes were very new to gamers, or console gamers.
Mm.
Now,
Yeah,
do you want to know the first 3D platform I played?
Yeah, what was the first 3D platform you played, Ben?
So, this happened on a beautiful, calm night I was still very young and still very into Super Mario World on the Super Nintendo, and I went down to Kmart Plaza, and out the front there was Mario smoking, and like a guy in a Mario costume, like a Super Mario World
Was
costume,
was
complete
it
with
like
tape.
a full like costume with a head and
Yeah,
or like a
full
mascot one?
head. I don't know
Right.
how he was smoking through the suit, but he was holding a cigarette. And I went
Sure.
up to him excitedly, and he snapped back into Mario mascot mode and greeted me and waved. And I was so excited to meet Mario. And we found out he was there advertising a new game. And so I go inside Kmart, and there's kids gathered around this new console that I've never seen before. And there's Mario swimming in dry docks, hanging out with some fish in 3D. It looked great. I was so excited, wanted one for Christmas. And then when I played Super Mario 64, running around, doing long jumps in the castle front yard, exploring this 3D terrain, climbing trees, and doing all these cool new moves Mario could never pull off on the 2D game. I loved it.
Mm. Yeah. Mario 64 is certainly a journey. That was like probably the third game I owned. So there we go for that one.
Mm.
But yeah, like it really was a huge step forward. I didn't know this at the time because it was my first experiences with video games with these ones.
Yeah, at the time I wasn't that aware of it.
Yeah. But like there's just something really appealing with Mario 64 and Banjo-Kazooie because of that like really open world. There's a lot of character to the world as well.
Mm-hmm.
And you wanted to search. Like I remember like memorizing every level just because you would spend hours as a kid running around aimlessly just looking at the world.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a really big factor in the enjoyment of just that feeling that there's something everywhere.
Yeah, it's largely believed that video games today, the best video games, have a big emphasis on exploration, and we see that in
Yep.
Legend of Zelda, we see that in Skyrim, and even the good FPS games to a certain extent have things
Even
that
like
let you
something
explore.
even something like Grand Theft Auto has that.
Oh yeah,
So yeah,
you're a big
that's one
fan of
thing
stuff.
that I think the 3D platformer really got right. Like I guess like you can talk to about like Link to the Past had a really good exploration, or even like Mega Man X. But there's something a little more. I'm not gonna say better because those games did it really well as well. But there's
Hmm.
something more inviting about it in a 3D environment. Something more deep,
Yeah,
like a
definitely.
third dimension.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's just I don't know. It's
I,
I'm
I have
lost for
to,
words. I don't know where to
I have to
start.
say, I've been playing Spyro the Dragon, the entire
Yeah,
trilogy, lately, because I figured out the PS Vita's use is to play PlayStation 1 games, and also because I
money
wanted
well
to,
spent.
yeah, I wanted to experience some 3D platforming that I hadn't played in a while. One
Yeah.
thing I love about the game is it has linear levels, but there's always stuff to explore and find in each level. You jump from platform to platform, um, and you could find all these secrets hidden behind corners, and a lot of them you find by changing the camera or deciding to glide somewhere and see if there's something hidden there.
Mm.
Lots of secrets and collectibles, and that really makes exploring in 3D fun. It's different to 2D. 2D, you see a lot of this. You see what's on the screen. It's hard to hide something without actually just not including it as an event.
Or
But
hiding it behind like something that like an item unlocked or something like
yeah,
that.
yeah. That hinders your progress. But in 3D platformers, your progress is occasionally hindered by your own sense of exploration.
Definitely, that's a very graceful way to put it.
Hmm. So shall we start by looking at kind of the history of 3D platformers,
Yeah,
where
that's a
where it
good one.
started?
That's a good place to start.
So
Um,
what did
yeah,
we
you just
just
want
discover as the first 3D platformer according to the Guinness Book of Records?
to. Let's see if I can. It's called Jumping Flash on the PlayStation 1, and we just found about this like a few minutes ago.
Yeah, just then.
Uh, this game is apparently the first 3D platformer. For some reason, actually we worked out, it's done in first-person mode, and you're jumping around on these platforms doing collectibles, but because it's in first-person mode, it is the most bizarre thing to look at, and it drives me insanely motion sick looking at it.
Go look up footage of Jumping Flash. We might even put a link to one of the videos.
Yep.
But it's motion sick inducing. It's this first person perspective, and yeah, it's super weird.
I understand that there was no conventions then, but like a first person 3D platformer, it's not. Well, having said that, there is Mirror's Edge.
Yeah, true.
But
that's balanced out by we have HD graphics also.
Yeah, this is just like this blur of colors, and the character jumps, and then the camera pans down to where you're gonna aim. That's
you gotta
super
look at your feet.
weird.
That's how I jump. Gotta look at your feet. But that's a really important part of the history, because 3D graphics was coming to video games for a long time. And we can see that in stuff like Star Fox on the Super NES.
Yeah, and the Mode 7.
Oh, yeah. Or even Donkey Kong, you've got pre-rendered 3D graphics making their way into the scene. But the problem with 3D environments is, for a long time, no one knew how to do the camera well. Like, where do you put the camera in a 3D environment? And this is... I think this really contributed to kind of some of the console wars going on between Nintendo and Sega. Sega had the jump on 3D and had more powerful consoles for a long time, and they had a whole bunch of kind of consoles in between 64 and SNES era that were experimenting with like 3D Sonic games from different perspectives, like 2D perspectives, isometric perspectives, 3D perspectives. And a lot of the time they didn't get it right, and there are a lot of scrapped Sonic games that failed to figure out the camera. Mario 64 comes on the scene, and it has, to this day, one of the best 3D environment cameras ever, this action camera. In the game, it's portrayed by a little Lakitu following you with the camera, and the way that camera moves in the 3D environment, it's like a separate entity, and it responds to the scenario you're in. So if you're running to the distance, it'll zoom out, and it'll zoom in close when you're sliding against a wall. It's quite dynamic in the 64, and that's what makes Mario 64 possible.
I want to rebut something you said. It was amazing when it came out, and it was a complete leap forward. In fact, it's what made the 3D platformer genre what it is that camera. Yep. But it is still not one of the best to date. Sorry, it is aged quite poorly, that camera. It's very usable, and like, but there's just a few things with it where it would like collision with a wall and be like jumping, and there's a few things there. So while it is impressive for the day, and there's nothing they could have done better, I don't think it's fair to say that it's one of the best still.
Maybe the ideas behind it is still some of the best. Like, if you compare Mario 64's camera to some other knockoff 64 game cameras,
Glover, yeah, 64,
but even then,
even PS3,
I'm gonna say even Epic Mickey on the Wii, and even Epic Mickey 2 on PS3, Wii U, Xbox 360, camera isn't right. There's something off about the Epic Mickey camera, as you know when we tried to play co-op.
I think it's not bad at programming then.
But that's what I'm saying. The Mario 64 camera held out for a really long time. And it's still really dynamic. Of course, it's hindered by technology. We can render cameras better now. But 3D platformer demands a heavy-duty camera to explore the environment.
Definitely. Like a Bear Grylls camera crew.
Mm-hmm. And so,
that's a weird reference.
Yes, that would be cool to play a game where you actually had a camera crew following you, filming what you were doing.
Well, 64 you do. He's just on a cloud.
Yeah. But like, occasionally you move your character, but the camera won't follow you because like the crew stop for lunch. It'd be interesting gameplay mechanic.
Can you make them fall in lava and then you don't have a camera? Like it doesn't move anymore?
Yes.
They're dead?
Yes. It's like Pikmin, but all your Pikmin are holding cameras.
Nintendo, gonna get an email later.
Here's our pitch.
Yeah.
So what about, let's talk about some other, we've talked about the camera extensively. What are some other gameplay mechanics that were quite unique to the 3D platforming genre?
Well, one thing that's especially appealed to me was the collectathon nature of the 3D platform. That was very much. It's not necessary. I would never say it was a necessary part of the 3D platformers because a lot of them didn't have this nature. But
what's an example of a 3D platformer that's not a collectathon? I can't think of one immediately. Can you think of one?
More of the modern ones. Not, I can't think of one on the top of my head, but more of the modern ones don't have that aspect as integral. Like, for example, Banjo-Kazooie and Mario 64, you needed the stars and the puzzles to progress. That was your goal. But something like, I guess, Sonic Adventure Battle 2, which is a 3D platformer, you never needed to unlock things. You just needed to finish to the end of the level. That was the goal.
I'd even say Super Mario Galaxy, whilst you still collect stars, is not a collectathon because you don't need the star bits. They're kind of leftover gameplay mechanics, but you don't need them to activate new powers or, to the same extent you needed them in Banjo-Kazooie.
But the thing about Mario Galaxy is there is only one star on the map at any time.
Yeah, that's
which
true
is
as well.
very different to 64. But anyway, going back to collectathons, great examples, obviously, of what we've mentioned is Banjo-Kazooie, with its 100 jiggies, or is it? Yeah, 100. Which I got 98 of.
Oh, wow, nice.
There's two I hate.
Yeah.
I don't believe you, Thanos.
No, I do.
Damn it. I gave up. Anyway.
It's hard.
Mario 64, Donkey Kong 64. Out of the top of my head, from that era, those are the best.
Donkey Kong 64 is in the Guinness Book of Records for having the most collectibles in any video game. Which
also hindered it because there was too much.
No, I disagree. I think it was really fun. I want to try and list them all. You've got golden bananas. You've got colored bananas for each character. Oranges for grenades. You've got different ammo for each character. You have blueprints. You have banana fairies. You have banana fairy films. You have crystal coconuts. Coins. 2 different kinds of coins. 3 different kinds of coins, I think. Medals. And power-ups, I guess, count. That's all I can think
of. Wow.
But it was a lot. There was a lot going on in that game.
There was a crap ton going on in that game. Technical term. But yeah. I think collectathons was something really important because it goes into that. It goes hand in hand with exploration, which we were mentioning before. Because
it's a reward for exploring.
Yeah, and it drove you to search every corner and find things that weren't necessarily part of your collecting quest, like just Easter eggs and things like that. And it nurtured the explorer inside you, and that I think that really defined what kind of gamer I ended up being. Because of Banjo-Kazooie's everything is something kind of mentality in the first game, especially where there was barely any bare environment. If it was there, there was something to look at or something to find. And I just think that's really important to the 3D platform because it wasn't necessarily needed, but it was something that really enhanced the genre.
Yeah. Another way I think it enhances is that having different collectibles is essentially different objectives you can work on. And if one track is too difficult, if you're trying to get the collectibles to progress the level, maybe you can work on getting the collectibles you need to get a new power-up or a new ability to help you progress in the game. In the Spyro that I've been playing recently, you get one kind of collectible for finishing the level from start to end, and you get a different kind you get orbs or dragon eggs for completing little mini missions inside the level. And so you can do that at your free own accord. You'll need a certain amount to then progress in the game, but you can get them in different ways. And I always found that was really good because it kept you playing. You never got to a point in the game where you were stuck because the game was so linear.
I'm going to ask you a question. what would you consider your favorite 3D platformer?
My
What would you?
favorite 3D platformer.
Yeah, like which one would you rank higher than the rest, and why?
I'm gonna say Banjo-Tooie is the definitive, hands down 3D platformer, and that's because Banjo-Tooie is, in my opinion, a perfect sequel. It kept everything that was great about Banjo-Kazooie. All your moves and abilities you have at the start of Banjo-Tooie, and it builds up on that. It gives you twice as many. The story is more interesting, the objectives are more interesting, the world is more interesting. The gameplay is better, and it's just a really solid experience, Banjo-Tooie. It's the perfect difficulty. It starts off fairly easy, it gets challenging, but it's always winnable.
Hmm.
How about
Well,
you? What
yeah,
would you
that's
consider?
yeah. Well, mine would be Banjo-Kazooie.
Yeah.
Or, okay, I guess we got a lot of bias on this show to the Banjo franchise, but there's nothing wrong with that because it's an amazing
Hmm.
2 games.
There's a
There's
reason
never been
Rare was beloved by everyone.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And Rare comes up a lot in this because there's something we haven't touched on yet was be Conker's Bad Fur Day,
Yes.
which took the family-friendly 3D platformer and turned it on its head.
Hmm.
The
Well,
buttload of cursing and gore.
that's an interesting story in itself because we know now Conker's Bad Fur Day was designed as another kid-friendly platformer, but it wasn't working, and Rare observed the patterns in the industry, and this is right at the end of the 64's lifespan where you're starting to get more adult games appearing.
Yep.
And they made Conker's Bad Fur Day the most adultest game I have ever played.
I think that's a bit of a stretch, but
I
yeah,
have not yet. Oh, well, I guess you've got a singing Pooh monster, so it's not that adult. But it's got a lot of violence and innuendo and drunks.
it is bleep, so it doesn't really hold up to a lot of more modern games, but
Is the original
yeah.
bleeped?
Yeah.
Okay. You can unlock swear mode, I think, in the Xbox remake.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to do that in 64.
No.
Yeah.
But that was a trend. Like 3D platformers with their cute mascots were seen as quite kiddie games, which is fair enough because at this point, the industry is revolving around kids. But
Yep.
as we transition from the 64 era to GameCube, PlayStation 2, I shouldn't say just one console, the GameCube, PlayStation 2,
Hold
and
on.
Xbox era. Yeah.
Hold on. We need to talk about. There's one more franchise on the 64 era, PlayStation 1 era that we need to really touch on in terms of 3D importance, 3D platform importance, and that is the Crash Bandicoot franchise.
Right. Yes. This was Sony's flagship. A lot of people are still big fans of Crash Bandicoot and wonder where he has vanished with his variation of 3D platforming.
Just that Bandicoot and that Hedgehog cannot keep up with the plumber.
Well, the thing about Crash Bandicoot was,
Moral of the
whilst
story
he...
is always win.
Crash Bandicoot, whilst he is 3D platformer, is still built around the side-scrolling version of 3D platforming.
Yeah.
So you're moving from one end of the level to the other end of the level, avoiding hazards to get there. There's not a heap of exploration in the original Crash Bandicoot games.
Yes and no. There was a lot of collectibles and a lot of
the secret routes,
hidden things and hard to get to platforms that you couldn't quite work out how to get. But yeah, there was less of that open. It was an open world thing, but it was very much. You could almost argue that it's more platformer than any of those other games because all you're doing is platforming.
It's platforming, yeah, true. And then it gets to levels where the platforms are exploding boxes only, and it's really platforming intense then.
I actually really like the Crash games. I didn't own them, but my cousin owned them and like family friends owned them, so I've played through all of them multiple times without owning them.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I've had a fairly good experience with it, despite being a Nintendo fanboy at a young age. But yeah, they're really well designed games,
Oh,
and
definitely.
yeah, they're quite different. And it's weird, like Mario 64 spawned a crap load of imposters, not imposters. What's the word I'm looking for?
Uh, Copycats.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, copycats. Where Crash really didn't. It was quite a unique brand. Like I can't think of any that like really took Crash's formula.
Yeah, there wasn't many that had the full 3D um, perspective that Crash had, where you're moving towards or away from the screen.
Yeah,
There was a few games like
it's still quite unique in that regard. Like it doesn't look like anything else in terms of
mm,
just a technical level.
mm. I think there were a few games that did knock it off 100%, like Donald Duck Quack Attack, but
Oh yeah, Donald Duck
and a
Quack
few
Attack.
like movie games, but yeah,
Yeah,
it kept a
they
little
don't
bit of
count. They're not
uniqueness.
real games.
There was a lot of on the PlayStation. There was a lot of 2.5D platformers where it's
Yeah, like
linear
what?
side scrolling. Colonia, I never know its second tag. It's like these rabbit things with
Oh yeah, I know the
anime.
one you're talking about. The one that
Yeah,
no
yeah,
one can pronounce.
yeah, yeah. Or games where the characters are 2D sprites in a 3D environment
Yeah.
platforming. Um, a bunch of Japanese games like that. But yeah, nothing quite like Crash Bandicoot, and that's probably why it was so beloved, but also why he kind of died because it was hard to then adapt Crash Bandicoot.
Yeah. So you tried other genres and failed miserably.
Yeah, and I mean they also lost their original creators, Naughty Dog, Insomniac. Um,
They made Crash Bandicoot, then they went on to Uncharted and Last of Us. Quite
yeah,
a
actually,
leap.
that's interesting. The jump from Crash Bandicoot to Last of Us. They have been a surprisingly good company. Oh, they went from Crash Bandicoot to Jack and Daxter,
Right.
which was another 3D platformer.
But that's next gen.
Yeah. One other thing I want to talk about gameplay for 3D platformer, I just
Yep.
remembered was when we're talking about Crash Bandicoot. It was the tightness of controls that really made the good 3D platformer.
Yes.
The Nintendo 64 controller. The reason you had such an awkward controller is because that controller was built specifically for Mario 64. Shigeru Miyamoto pretty much forced them to stick to that controller and to bind all the buttons to specific things in Mario 64, and that's why it didn't always work for other games. But for Mario 64, it was super tight, and then Rare used that to be even tighter in Banjo, Kazooie, and Tooie. I think, and Donkey Kong 64. What's impressive is how many moves and abilities you can pull off with the one controller.
Yeah, that's very true.
And you need the tightness of jumping for the chasms and just exploration in 3D environment. Like we really nailed it.
Yeah.
In that generation.
Well, unlike the camera in Mario 64, one really thing that hasn't aged. Sorry, that hasn't aged badly is what I was going to say. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
What is how the controls? Other than the control stick sort of feels old by today's standards, the 64 control stick, but how easy it is to jump and maneuver and do all those crazy acrobatics that the Fat Plumber could do, is really impressive, and it hasn't changed that much how he does move in that 3D environment with its successes, Mario Sunshine and the Galaxy games.
Yeah, definitely.
He moves essentially the same, and so it's something they got really right really early. And I think that's one of the greatest things about 64 is that it's got all these things that Mario 64 specifically is it had all these things that have kept because they got it so right the first time that they haven't needed to. Like that's a really impressive game in that regard.
It really created a whole new genre, and I don't think we've had a genre creation like that ever since. It's just been an adaptation of other genres. It was really revolutionary. I
probably think of examples, but whatever.
Yeah. I found with Spyro on playing on the Vita, the controls are really tight, and because you're dealing with a certain number of polygons for the character in a world that's made up of a certain number of polygons, like there's not a heap of complexity to the objects or props in the levels. I found that I feel I have more control over the character as well. A lot of modern games are very cinematic when you're doing stuff, even something as simple as jumping. You know, your character has a certain animation, and that restricts
Yeah.
how you move. With these games, because the animations are so simple, I feel I have much more control over Spyro jumping to a platform, and every action I feel like I inputted into the game, and if I die, it's my own fault because I wasn't
Yeah.
screwed over by animation. It's just I just missed the jump because I was bad at it.
Yeah, that's very true because it's a completely different argument and it's a topic in of itself. Is that back then it was more about gameplay than how it looks. So it
Yeah.
was. Yeah,
And
let's
there
not go
are
down that road. We'll be
there are
half an
certain
hour
derpy monsters in Spyro that'll prove that. But
later.
I think yeah, these games these games weren't built. They were built with completely different philosophy to how we build modern games. Um,
Yeah.
to a game built back then, you're crafting the world and the engine and the game around what's happening in the game. So with all these different objectives taking place in the world, so say Banjo-Kazooie has all these guys you give stuff to and they give you a jiggy. They've built each component of that game based around what objective they want to happen, and so you get variations in gameplay, um, aside from the core, like what you can do, jump and run and stuff. Whereas modern games, especially with open world games, which is kind of what the 3D platform has become, you build an engine and you have different teams and development teams working on different parts of that engine, and they make really specific events that are then repeated a lot with some variation. And I find that restricting to exploration because we have these huge worlds you can explore now, but you just kind of do the same gameplay mechanic over and over again. And the handful of it that's included in the game isn't crafted specifically around new objectives because they're focusing on other stuff as well. Did that make
Yeah.
sense?
I also think what's hindered is we have been spoiled by too big environments, so everyone's trying to make bigger and bigger environments,
Yeah.
and I find them less appealing because like that means you need like to be faster to move around the environment, so you need vehicles and blah 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 blah. That's a
Which
big
then you're
probably a
not
big
playing as the character.
it's a probably big reason why the 3D platform has really died down is because it will compare to these sandbox games that have completely different movement style in terms of size.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, and I just think it's hard to compete with that because
Yeah.
that's what people want is these gigantic, unbelievable worlds that take
That,
forever to pass from one side to the other, rather than be interesting to pass from one side
mm.
to the other. Be smaller but be tighter.
And to pick on the weakest calf at the moment in gaming,
Yep.
um, in Destiny, you have these huge worlds, and I understand it's an MMO and they're meant to house multiple players, but they never feel full populated, and there's so many caves and corners and nooks and crannies that you're supposed to explore. I don't know why else the game devs would put that in the game, but there's nothing there. Occasionally you find a chest that gives you some currency or maybe one gear, but there's nothing in that corner, whereas 3D platformers had something in every part of the map. No part was blank. Everything was deliberate and intentional. I think it's the
Yeah,
intentionality
intentional.
that we
Yeah.
miss. Yeah.
Hmm. So I think it's time to talk about the jump to the next generation that 64, Mario 64 and all that went into the next generation with the GameCube, PlayStation 2, Xbox era.
Mm-hmm.
And what I find, thinking back to that era,
Mm-hmm.
there wasn't a lot that changed.
Initially, yeah.
In terms of just speaking 3D platformers.
Mm-hmm.
They played almost identical. Mario Sunshine had the new flood mechanic, but the worlds are very much the same as 64. And it was felt very much like a sequel.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really interesting to think about. Like there was not much of a change between these eras, and then after that era, they suddenly died out.
Mm.
It's interesting.
I've got two opinions on what affected that.
Yep.
Firstly, I think we started introducing physics into games. So when you're dealing with polygons, things behaved very polygon or video game-like. You've got giant floating collectibles and stuff. But then they started adding physics, and we see this in Super Mario Sunshine. You've got the flood and you've got the water physics, and you can use that to build up momentum and to reach new heights and stuff. I think it personally worked in Mario Sunshine, but if
I
you
don't know why
haven't,
everyone craps on the game. Honestly, it's good.
it's a bit of a black sheep. There's elements of it that feel very un-Mario, and there are other elements that feel more Mario than ever. And then there's also that massive break in story in the middle of the game where you have to get a lot of stars. And there's nothing really motivating you. But it's a good game, I think.
Yeah.
But I think we started seeing, especially, we had the emergence of shooters with Halo and stuff, and they're all using very physics-based vehicles and props, and even the gunplay is starting to use physics to calculate how to kill someone. And I think for 3D platformers, it was hard to keep up with incorporating physics if you haven't traditionally come from a genre of games that have relied on it.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I think is just the maturity. I was touching on this before. We started to see games like Conker trying to figure out how to be mature but be this old world style of gameplay. And another 3D platformer, very underrated, probably for a good reason, but is remembered fondly by me and a couple of my friends as the game Vex. And Vex was a 3D platformer where you play as this diminutive Wolverine type guy, and it's just the weirdest tone. Parts of the game are charming and cutesy like Banjo-Kazooie, and the other half of the game, you're slaughtering guys with your knife hands, and you're fighting sumo wrestlers that give you the finger. This is the first time I saw the finger. I was Flip the Bird in a video game. It was dark and gritty, and your family died at the start of the game, but it was a cutesy 3D platformer. It was the weirdest tone.
Wow, I personally have never heard of it before you brought it up. So there's that, and it was on all 3 platforms, so go figure.
But, like, I guess what was interesting is it's obviously trying to branch out and appeal to this old audience where games are shifting, and we see Xbox try and shift and create and figure out that demographic as opposed to the GameCube. And I think 3D platformers found it hard to make that jump, ironically.
That's one thing they did best. Then they failed at it. Yeah. So I guess a big part of what we wanted to talk about in this podcast was what has happened to platformers and why we just... It's just not it's basically a non-existing genre at this point.
Yeah, pretty much. We have rare entries, like Epic Mickey, but they weren't that successful. And we have a few Kickstarter games like Hat in Time, which are coming out, trying to ride on the nostalgia, and Lobo Destroyer or something.
Don't know that one.
In terms of AAA, like 3D platformers was the milk and meat of gaming. It's where all the money was, and it's up and gone. And it's just, I find it really bizarre because so many tropes and mechanics of 3D platformers are inherent to video games. Like, collectibles and health bars.
Jumping.
Yeah, movement in a 3D environment, all spawned out of the 3D platformer domain.
Yeah, what makes me the strangest, and I noticed this growing up as well, and how suddenly they disappeared.
Yeah.
It was just suddenly they weren't being made anymore. Opposed from the few, Mario games and Nintendo pumping out a few here and there, but they were never as big or as important as they used to be. And a bit of that is like changing with the times and demographics and what audiences wanted now and stuff like that. But yeah,
I was just thinking then, because the disappearance of 3D platformers lines up with the emergence of the American gaming market. But at the same time, I still think the majority of 3D platformers are created by American companies historically. Even Rare, whilst its ties with Japan was good, it's a British company. It's a British company, but it's Western mentality, I guess. Oh, I guess that's different. I'm
No,
just
well,
trying to think.
I think a lot of it was because the thing is, you talk to a lot of modern gamers now, and they aren't invested in Japanese games at all.
No.
Where any gamer, like even younger gamers from the GameCube and 64 era, were playing. I'm not going to say primarily Japanese games because I think that's would be an overstatement, but they will always be playing both.
Yeah.
Japanese and Western games, and
Well,
there was always
like
that openness between both of them. But now it seems in the modern era you play Western games, you primarily play Western games, or you primarily play Japanese games. Again, an argument that could a different topic that can be explored in a completely new episode.
yeah.
But yeah, I think because I think as long a lot of them were Western-made games, but they were very influenced by that Japanese mentality and the mentality of the audiences accepting a lot of Japanese games and Japanese gameplay.
Yeah, specifically
yeah,
cute mascot characters.
Yeah, and the acceptance of cartoonishness.
Yeah.
Whether it be Western cartoonishness or Eastern cartoonishness.
And stylizing the game around that rather than just being something gritty and realistic.
But I think what I'm trying to say is, and the bottom line is, Halo ruins everything. But another topic for another day.
Even then, Halo borrows heavily from the 3D platformer genre because you can still jump in Halo.
I was more making the argument that the rise of Halo made the Western market split.
Well, people got really into first-person shooters, and Western RPGs came onto the scene as well. Like, there's always a couple on PC, but it wasn't until the PlayStation. When would you say Western RPGs hit consoles?
Well, Morrowind was on GameCube, Xbox, PlayStation 2.
Right, yeah, it was that era, because you also had, like, Fable.
Yeah, Fable.
And a few, like, Champions of Norath.
I don't know.
D&D style RPGs started making their way. And, yeah, I think that just started drawing people's attentions. Like, 64 was primarily limited to 3D platformers with the occasional RPG or puzzle game. And I guess they started or adventure game. Yeah, true, like Zelda. But they started exploring other genres, and for whatever reason, those ones seem to stick with the American market.
Damn American market, killing my 3D platformers. I guess this is a good time to bring up what are some modern 3D platformers, because they're not purely extinct.
It seems like
they're like the White Rhinos. Like, there's a few around, only a few.
It seems like there's a bit of nostalgia that's bringing a couple of them back.
Like a Hat in Time coming out.
Yeah, I've been wondering if, like, previously with Kickstarter games and indie games, we've been very obsessed with doing 8-bit, 16-bit sprite side-scrollers RPGs. I'm wondering if we're going to have kind of like a renaissance where everyone's really obsessed with 3D games. What I think makes that difficult is that we have better engines for 3D now. If you're going to do something in 3D, you do a good job. It's hard to demake a 64-era game because you're not limited as much. You're not limited by graphics and textures and sound. And it's really hard to recreate, I think.
Yeah, I can agree to that. I just think there's something... We always, when we make a 16-bit or an 8-bit game, we stylize it and it looks stylized. But if you make a 3D game with like the polygony graphics and all that, it's just gonna look old. Like, there's no way you can.
It doesn't look good. It looks unfinished.
It might look good. Like, I like that era, but like it would always look old. There's something about it that doesn't age as gracefully. But like a modern 16-bit indie game doesn't look old because it's got that polish
You can
do it.
make sprites
Modern
look really
games,
pristine and
yeah,
clean, but you
and
can't make
technically they're not
bad
16-bit half the
textures that.
time.
Yeah, yeah, true, true. There are a million colors.
Yeah.
Um, I was going to mention some examples I thought of 3D platforming. Returning
Yep.
is the Skylander style games, which is a kick in the
Uh,
teeth to Spyro the Dragon original. But is that
I
3D
you
platforming?
can't jump.
Oh, can't you jump? Oh, I take that back then. I thought you could jump.
I don't think you can. I can never recall any jumping puzzles or whatnot. It's a beat 'em up game.
Okay, well, I'll change that to Disney Infinity then. Disney Infinity is
Okay.
largely a creation tool, but it's built around exploring as this third person character in 3D
Yeah, it's
environment
got
that
the
you
control
build.
scheme of a 3D platformer.
Yeah. Once again, not as tight because it's trying to do too many things. It's not
Well,
as
yeah.
intentional, but that's an example. Um, and then we have Super Mario Cats and Jazz, uh, 3D World.
Yes, which is important because it's a blend between. It's got the gameplay of the 2D games, which is really
Hmm.
popular lately,
Yeah.
but it has the engine of the 3D
Mm.
game.
I,
I don't
I
know.
think that game is a beautiful hybrid to me.
Yeah, oh,
Um,
it's perfect.
yeah, it's
Well,
it's
perfect.
cat
Because you
puns.
turn into a cat, you know? Eh,
I'm gonna pause you there with the puns, Eric. Get it?
no, you didn't.
Pause. um,
Oh, Ben, are you kidding me?
oh man, I'm getting me out of here. Um,
Oh, dear.
but that game is really great because yeah, you have this linear progression to the level, but you're moving in 3D space with your friends. It's a multiplayer co-op platforming experience, and I was so desperate to play something like that for the longest time before it came out.
Yeah,
Um,
I didn't realize how desperate I was until I played it. I was like, why
yeah,
haven't I played a game like this in a long time? This is interesting. There's
like
been the
I was,
Galaxy games, but that was, yeah.
and between Galaxy, we had a lot of nostalgia for Mario side scrollers,
Yeah,
with us new Super Mario Brothers, and
which
I have a
current
high
titles?
tolerance for that. I love those games, but not everyone does, and people are getting
I
sick of
don't.
it. But when the 3D world came out, it was it's just gorgeous.
Yeah, no, that's definitely the better improvement.
It's
Um,
tight and it's 3D platforming. It's basic, but I'm hoping that reignites Super Mario platformers.
yeah. There's always been a few on handhelds though, hasn't there? I'm not a huge Mario person, but you're the bigger Mario person here.
Mario,
Like 3D, there's been like 3D Worlds and Lands, 3D Land or whatever it is
oh right,
on the
3D Land on
DS.
3DS. Yeah, yeah. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
that works really well because not only do you have the the 3D controls, you have the 3D perspective with the actual 3D stereoscopic 3D adding to the gameplay. It's one of the few 3DS games where that affects or helps increase gameplay, but you get the
Right.
perspective and it helps you line up your jumps better. Um, it's in, the jumping mechanic in 3D Land is really tight for that reason. Probably one of the tightest jumping mechanics I've ever played.
Right. Yeah, because is there any more on the handhelds, like in terms of just 3D platformers?
They remade Mario 64 on the DS when it first launched.
Yeah, that doesn't really
Um,
count.
no, but it was an impressive feat. Um, oh, jeez.
You know, okay. I'm gonna what's the most recent 3D platformer you played that hasn't been Mario?
I mean, you mean besides Spyro the Dragon?
No, not recently, but most recent released, like the newest one. Because I think it's important to talk about
It
ones
it
very
it'd have to be
modern
Disney
games.
Infinity.
Yep.
Um, before that was uh, Epic Mickey 2, I believe.
Right.
Um, I can't think of many others.
You have played the Alice Madness Returns, haven't you?
I have played that, and that is excellent. Alice Madness Returns is a messed up, gothic-y, slaughtery version of Alice in Wonderland, but the gameplay is a platformer with a quite intense action battle system. And it's really fun because it's a platformer. That's why I kept playing. Like, it's not really my turn of game, but it was so much fun jumping from card to card through this messed up, gory Wonderland, purely from the platforming.
Right.
Hmm. I mean, combat was a little bit fun. You got stuff like a pepper grinder that behaved like a machine gun, and you like shoot pepper at the noses of things. But the platforming
Okay.
component is what kept me playing. It's very fun.
I see. Yeah. So that's probably looking back in terms of the games I owned. Most recent example, like I think my vision's skewed because I've only played this recently. I don't know if it is the most recent non-Mario 3D platform, but Psychonauts,
Oh yeah. Well, it's
which
been
is really
re-released a lot.
old now. I
Um,
just looked it up. It's 2005.
hmm. Huge underrated gem at the time. It was one of the Xbox like near launch titles, and I had a trailer for it when I first got the Xbox, and the trailer terrified me. I did not want to play that game. Uh, and then I eventually played it when they re-released it on the 360, I believe, after Tim Schafer campaigned for it. And yeah, that is an amazing 3D platformer
Oh
because it's
yeah,
not really a platform. It incorporates RPG and story elements into the game.
yeah. I think it's actually one of my absolute favorite 3D platformers, right under Banjo-Kazooie, I reckon.
Mm.
Because it has all the best things about 3D platformers. It has a great story, a really like one of my favorite video game stories of all time.
Yes.
Great art, great abilities that you can mix and match and can do things to explore with those abilities, and has all the collectathon you could hope for.
Hmm.
It's got it's I think anyone who may have missed out on this game or haven't heard of it before should definitely pick up Psychonauts if they're interested in 3D platformers,
It'll
because I
be a
really think it's
buck on Steam. It's forever in humble bundles. um,
but I think one of the pinnacles of
mm.
3D platformers.
What made it so good was it told the story, but you went everywhere in the story, including inside people's heads, because you explored that zone in a 3D environment. Um, I think that's what made 3D platformers again so powerful, was because you go to all these places and all these fantasy worlds and you actually explore them. I've played a lot of games recently where you're progressing through the story and there's some kind of fantasy landscape in the background, but you don't actually get to go there. You don't actually
Hmm.
fully explore it. You're restricted to the castle or the airship or the tower or the laboratory, but you're never actually going into the world and experiencing the world yourself without being really prompted. Or you're in a sandbox city and you just see the same terrain over and over again.
Right. Yeah. Um. I don't know really what to go off now.
um, well, is there any other 3D platforms you want to talk about?
Just briefly, because I don't think there's a lot to talk about, because we have talked about the topic extensively. I don't think there's
Hmm.
much to add. But
Sure.
one I hold very dear is Rayman 2,
Oh,
the
right,
greatest,
Rayman, yeah.
which has been his franchise is now back to 2D platforming,
Hmm.
where he really does shine. Let's not
Oh,
be
yeah.
as
The
honest.
Origins and Legends are really knockout games.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But uh, Rayman 2 was definitely a childhood favorite of mine because it
Hmm.
had really, it was a lot more linear than the more collectathon ones,
Yep.
because you did have a start and end point to the level, and your goal was to just reach the end. But it had a really, it felt in depth at the time, combat system, but right now, going back and playing it is really quite simple. But it had a combat system I hadn't really seen, with the locking on and firing projectiles like that really freely. And it was a very inventive world. It had some great platforming things, and it had those breakaways from the platforming where you were like on a skateboard, or you're riding a rocket, or you're doing all these other things, and you would break up the gameplay through that, which the 3D platformers have done in the past and continue to do, which we haven't really talked about. But I think Rayman 2 is a good example of doing that.
Yeah, definitely. Very quirky world, very rich.
There's another Western-made game. I think it's French developers, aren't they?
Yeah, Ubisoft.
Yeah, so,
Mark Ansel.
Yeah, Rayman 2. There was another one.
Speaking of Mark Ansel, one game we have to talk about because it's the most underrated game on the planet. Beyond Good and Evil.
Right.
It's really a hybrid. That game is think of like the most amazing game that should have ever existed, and then pretend that they crammed it into a box that it just didn't fit in. That's what that game is. There are so many components to that game's gameplay. Very rich exploration and RPG mechanics, and storyline is outstanding. But it's still got a lot of the conventions of 3D platforming. You're exploring terrain in 3D space and climbing up stuff and jumping on things and sneaking around. That game is really good, and also created by Mark Ansel behind Rayman. He has been developing Beyond Good and Evil 2 for the longest time. It was supposed to be out on Xbox 360 and as a launch title, and I wonder if it had come out if we would have seen a very different state of 3D platformers.
Wow, that's hard to imagine.
Yeah, but he's held on to that, and he's still developing it, and he's going to release it when the technology is right, and I reckon sometime soon, possibly this generation. And I think that's if they keep the 3D platforming components, and when they showed off some test footage last, it looked more like Assassin's Creed mixed with Mirror's Edge. But if it keeps some of the 3D components, it could be, our most powerful experience with 3D platforming in the modern era. Yep.
Yeah, definitely. I've never played it, so it wasn't on my radar. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see, because that's a game that has a huge cult following, and if it comes out, it probably would be a big deal, and it would be interesting to see what that sparks within the industry.
Yeah, definitely.
Now,
its relevancy is very redundant, but this game has been in constant development for it must be getting closer to 10 years now. Like, it'd be a huge amount of time it's been in development.
Right.
And we don't have games these days that are in that long development. We have games that only have a year of development. If they polish this and really care about this and make it the game they fully envision in their head, it could be amazing.
Yeah, it'd be amazing, like Duke Nukem 3D. Which has never come out like Half-Life 3. But
yeah.
Now, would you consider the 3D Sonic games platformers?
Yes.
Because they are, but they're also... Sonic games are kind of just Sonic games.
Yeah. Well, look, actually, we had Sonic Generations, and that was really interesting, because that you could play as old Sonic, and the levels were 2D perspective, and very 2D Sonic gameplay. You even had the same physics as the original Sonic on the Sega. But then you could play the levels as modern Sonic in a 3D perspective, and there were still lots of side-scrolling sections, but the camera was more like that Crash Bandicoot camera talking about, like in a 3D environment that brought back a little of the charm of Sonic Adventure Battle 1 and 2. So, yeah, I'd say it's a 3D platformer.
Because I don't know if it's just style to say, because like there's two entries I quite like, was Adventure 2 and Heroes. And I think that those are very, it's like interesting takes on 3D platforming. While yes, the focus is on gotta go fast,
Good or fast.
but there is a lot of like jumping puzzles in them and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have the open world, except for the hub world, which is
That's interesting to
meaningless.
talk about. Is Sonic Boom is coming out, and look, Sonic has
Yes.
had many low points in the past, and I understand if you're no longer a Sonic fan, but I think it'll be interesting to see whether this game is good or not, because it seems to be riding a lot more on the 3D mechanics. They're breaking away from just running in linear levels to there is an overworld hub, I believe, you can explore that's quite open. The levels, I think, are still sections that you have to progress through quite linear to the narrative, but you can play as different characters and there's a bit more focus on combat and jumping and exploration. My understanding of it, I haven't played it yet.
Yeah. It's interesting to see, being the first Western developed Sonic
Yeah.
game.
I imagine it's a
I don't think
very
that's
different
quite true, but
experience. I don't know if it'll be good yet or not.
yeah. Well, we'll just see if the Sonic stigma
Sonic Cars.
yeah, goes outside Team Sonic,
Mm.
and he just hits rock bottom again. Goes back to being a junkie in the gutter.
Yeah. Oh dear. Poor Sonic.
Or he kind of brought it on himself.
Yeah. I also believe there's a new Pac-Man game that's a 3D platformer.
Oh,
Old
Pac-Man's someone who should stay in the past.
He's an icon. Icons never truly die.
Yeah, yeah, but they stay as icons. They don't necessarily need
Well,
new
tell that to
things.
Superman. Um, one game we should mention before we wrap up.
Yep.
Ty the Tasmanian Tiger. Uh,
Oh gosh.
Australians only game. I don't know if that's true. We probably make Borderlands. But Ty the Tasmanian Tiger, Australia's platform game. It's pretty much just like a poor man's Mario 64, but with Australian animals and bad Australian accents. We have footage of us playing it on PYP. Mitchell and I played it, so link that to them, Harry.
It's actually the first series, so it's a
A
good
very
starting
first
point
series.
to get into
Yeah.
PYP content.
Yeah, a game commentary. Yeah, that was another 3D platformer. That series is interesting because it starts off as a very vanilla platform, and as it expanded, it tried to cash in on some of the more popular game genres, and it pretty much becomes a vehicle shooter in the third one.
All right. I'm
Yeah.
trying to understand you because you've gone full roboto on me.
Oh, have I?
Yeah, and I think you're getting a lot of lag, so your voice is sped up for when it gets delivered. So it's a
Oh.
kind of interesting mix. I hope it gets recorded this way because it sounds hilarious.
Oh. Oh, we probably should wrap this up soon, but I just remembered we haven't
Yep.
actually talked about Rare, and what happened to
Yeah.
Rare. Do you want to take us through what happened to everyone's beloved company?
I don't think I want to. It's
Are
too
you
sad,
emotionally
dude.
ready?
It just gives me like that whole story just gives me another reason to hate Microsoft. But
Yeah.
basically, Rare was the developer of the best games ever.
Tooie, Banjo-Tooie, Donkey Kong 64, Star Fox Adventures,
Donkey Kong
Donkey
Country,
Kong Country
Bad Fur Day.
series, Conker's Bad Photo. Yeah.
But yeah, and then they got bought by Microsoft.
Wait. You
And
have to
then
make it sadder. They had like heaps of creative freedom, and like they were doing these amazing games, really living the passion. And Nintendo valued them so much that Nintendo, I think Shigeru Miyamoto gave him, or the president gave them a bonsai tree that they planted in
yeah,
their backyard in UK. Like that signified their relationship with Nintendo.
I'm pretty sure they had some bad blood over Star Fox. But is that the last game they developed for Nintendo?
Yeah. Donkey Kong
Yeah.
Racing was in development after that, but that never saw the light of day.
Yeah. So
Then-
yeah, then they got bought by Microsoft. Then they
And my
started
understanding is,
Pooh.
yeah, literally, Conker's Bad Fur Day remake with HD poo.
Yeah.
But my
What everyone
understanding,
wanted to see.
yeah, my understanding is that Rare got a bit big for their boots, and they thought they could name any price, and they kind of stepped away from the shelter of Nintendo. Microsoft snatched them up. Microsoft not even understanding how the company worked. There's a story that one of the Microsoft employees walks through Rare, sees a poster of Donkey Kong, and is like, "Yes, we own Donkey Kong now," which wasn't true, being Nintendo's first character.
That is the most ridiculous thing ever.
And Microsoft sectioned them off into areas, and they lost a lot of their creativity. Microsoft, my understanding is they have a lot more structure to their game dev team.
All the original crew aren't working for Rare anymore.
Yeah, they've left.
And I think
And
a big like poster child for what we're saying and like what we're trying to convey with this podcast, without much structure and all that, is Banjo-Kazooie nuts and bolts. And I think that really sums up what we've been talking about.
yeah,
Is that a game at the end of Banjo-Tooie, you beat Gruntilda. You get saying, she goes, "I'll be back at Banjo 3," and you, as a kid, you're like, yes, gonna get a GameCube, gonna get Banjo 3 on it.
and we waited like 10 years for it.
We waited 10 years. We've had trailers, we've had screenshots, we've had hints and Easter eggs and things and that. And if we finally get the next Banjo game, and it's not even a platformer anymore, platformers were so irrelevant by the time Banjo came to its third game that it wasn't even a platform. It was like this stupid cart thing, and it was the worst thing ever, and it killed my childhood. That was the end of my childhood right there.
The story is so meta in its own critique of itself, because it's a joke they try and do in that Banjo and Kazooie have got fat in their 10-year absence. They're just sitting around playing an actual Xbox in the starting cutscene. Then Gruntilda appears, and some weird lord of the video games appears, and he's like, "Oh, you guys need a fight and a challenge." He sets up the world with like 1,000 collectibles, and they start going collecting. And then he stops them because he says collectibles are boring and no one wants to play that. Here's the kart racing game instead.
While it could come off funny in a good game, it comes off as a kick in the teeth for anyone who actually enjoyed that.
Punch in the nads. It was the end of 3D platformers, definitively.
Yeah. If Banjo couldn't follow up with a 3D platformer, what could?
But look, let's end on this note.
Whoa, that's super sad.
Hang on. Recently, I believe, leaked by a very good informer for, I forgot the name of the website, Neograph, or whatever that website is. There was Morse code, and when you translate the Morse code, and I think it has some connection to Rare, when you translate the Morse code, it's BK E3 2015. And we know Rare is working on something big, apparently, even though none of the original stuff is there. But we might see the return of a Banjo 3 platform on the Xbox One. Now, that's not necessarily the best fate, but maybe we'll see the return of 3D platformers, and maybe Xbox One will surprise us and be the savior of 3D platformers. Or we won't see that. Yeah, Harry, you there? Have you dropped out? Something has happened to you. That's cool. Well, Harry has left us probably to cry about Banjo-Kazooie, and the very sad loss of 3D platforming. But thanks for listening to the show this week. If you have a fond experience with the 3D platformer, let us know in the comments below. Please post about your favorite 3D platformer. Tell us, do you miss the genre? Do you wish the genre was still around? What modern 3D platform-esque games have you played and enjoyed? Let us know some feedback about your experiences with 3D platformers, and we'll comment message with you. Anyway, this has been the Pick Your Play podcast. I'm Ben. I did have Harry alongside me, but he's dropped out. Thank you very much for listening to our rant, an exploration of where 3D platformers went. Harry, are you back yet? Harry, do you want to say goodbye?
Hello, are we
We're
back?
saying goodbye now. Yeah, but we're saying goodbye. Say goodbye to everyone.
What the hell happened?
I don't know. Just say goodbye.
Okay,
Harry, say goodbye. Say goodbye. Say goodbye to the nice people.
it's not my fault I'm not saying goodbye. It's because the server just crashed and I got
Say
kicked from.
goodbye. Harry, this is awkward. Say goodbye.
I don't know if I can now. Like, it's too awkward. Maybe I should just like look down and walk away. Like,
All right,
really
well,
awkward.
Harry's gonna walk away. Goodbye, guys. Thanks for listening to PYP Podcast. Make sure you check out our gameplay videos of Ty the Tasmanian Tiger and future podcasts.
Yeah, check it out.
Yeah, see you guys soon.
See you guys.